Bill is one of the foremost historians in California that studies California. He is a professor and chair of the history department at USC and director of the Huntington USC Institute on California and the West. Professor Deverell teaches courses on environmental history, the history of Los Angeles, and the history of photography, among others. He has published several books on the history of California and the American West. His scholarship has explored the development of the West in the 19th and 20th centuries and has explained how different groups of Americans have lived side by side in this dynamic state. His forthcoming book is to bind up the nation's wounds, the American West after the Civil War. And the other thing that's not in my remarks that were prepared for me to read, and I hope I did okay with that, is that Bill used to run the history project at UC San Diego. This was before my time, but I'm just so very pleased to have him here. I hope you'll join with me in welcoming Bill Deverell.
Do you need this on for the taping?
Yeah.
You do?
Or
okay.
just this thing right here.
Yeah.
So do you want to take it off?
No, this is okay. That's all right. This is fine.
Okay.
This is fine. Thanks so much, Nancy. Before I begin, Anthea's comment about cell phones reminds me, I have a friend, this is a true story, I have a friend who a week ago told me he was in Washington, D.C. at a talk, and a member of the NSA was the speaker, and he got up in front of the podium and he said, "Would you please turn your cell phones off? And if you can't, I will." I want to just start, let me start by thanking the project for having me here. I have a great fondness and a really warm spot in my heart for the project, and all the work, which is now a legacy project, all the work and heritage of the project over these many years, reaching into the lives of teachers and students, drawing the academy and the K-12 community of educators and students together. It's really fabulous. And so anything I can do from my position down in Southern California, and I come from Southern California in peace, I'm delighted to help out. It's just such a wonderful project, and the excitement that's generated by this kind of stirring of the curricular pot is really important. I don't have to tell all of you. Before I begin the substance of my remarks, let me just offer you two things to write down if you don't mind. One is a website or a URL, and it's a simple one. It's hdlhuntingtonorg. No www, no nothing, just hdl.huntington.org. The HDL is short for Huntington Digital Library. These are digitized sources across the Huntington Library's magnificent holdings, but pretty centrally located in American historical imagery and digitized documents, publicly available from any computer. No access, no codes, no passwords, nothing. And it's a growing site. So another useful site alongside many of the other digital projects that are bringing primary sources, of course, into the daily life of our students, really in a kind of waterfall capacity. So please note that. And then the second one is just simply to note my email, which is deverell@usc.edu, which is my last name, .usc.edu. I would be, for the teachers in the room, I would be delighted to be of service as you bring some of these issues into your students' lives and how we might be able to work together, because it's really thrilling. I have to tell you that the last couple days, Monday and Tuesday of this week, I was part of a review team in Southern California for a middle school and high school history department, joint history department. There was a history department at the middle school and then a history department at the high school. Big history department, 20 faculty members. And I was part of a review team evaluating the curriculum and the approach to history education for those 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 graders. And we did a lot of work, and it was really exciting. And then there was an exit interview with the head of school and with the history department chairs and the review team and the faculty, and we presented our findings. And at one point, one of the history department faculty members said, as a collegiate educator, what skills do you expect or would you like to see students present with when they come to the university? And it's not that. It's the history blueprint. It really, for that kind of complex of historical thinking, familiarity with sources, skills-based analysis tools or analytical tools, primary source facility and familiarity, the centrality in many respects of California as an opportunity to teach larger issues of American and global history. That's it. So this is terrific. This is really exciting. And without really going towards the blueprint in my answer to that, I was sketching out really the blueprint project. and what's going on with that. So really wonderful. All right, so in conversation with Beth and Nancy as well about me being up here today, and please feel free to interrupt with questions, or if I go too fast as I get kind of carried away here, please, by all means, I'll save some time, and I would like to talk about acorns, actually, because acorns are actually far more interesting than the textbooks and than this makes clear. There's a really interesting feature of acorns in California history, but I'll get there maybe in Q&A. All right. My charge was to talk about, in essence, an attempt to reinvigorate California instruction across grade levels and across multiple themes, kind of blueprint-based, or soon-to-be blueprint-based. In particular, the linked themes of race and immigration, the natural environment, and the political landscape of California. So those are the cross-cutting themes that I'm going to speak about. I'm going to case study them through a particular analysis here, and talk about the ways in which we might light up our students, and also the ways in which we might work together across the educational divides that are oftentimes systemic or structural. Of course, the K-12 community and the academic community, but you know as well as I do, there are sometimes challenges within the K-12 community about collaboration. I'm going to also speak directly, as the invitation came to me, about a particular period. So we're going to look at some themes: race and immigration, political landscape, environment, and I'm going to temporally set it in California history at the end of the 19th century and the early 20th century. So think in the old-fashioned way in which we learned this as students, kind of the apex of the Gilded Age, and the questions of that complex of ideas and distribution of wealth at the end of the 19th century unto the early 20th century and the rise of the progressive era, right, in California history. One thing I don't need to remind you is if you bring to your students questions about race and immigration, the environment, and the political landscape of California, you have an immediate opportunity to render those intimate to those students and them to you. Those are issues, of course, which touch upon the lives of every person in California, and we can learn from our students just as we can teach them. Those are really important, complex ideas that we can make, ideally, we can make the threads between the past to the present. So the other thing that this exit interview asked me about yesterday is about students presenting into college history courses. My ideal student is not necessarily a student with AP knowledge. We won't necessarily have to go there today. Not necessarily that at all. It's with historical empathy. A student who recognizes that, let's say, the Civil War wasn't that long ago. We have particularly if you're teaching the younger set, that's a really tough temporal bridge for them to cover when the Reagan administration is really ancient for them. But if I can get students who have an appreciation of the proximity of the past, that's really important. Because if it's proximate, it's almost by default and almost by definition important. It's right there. And of course, that's what all of us as history educators insist upon, that we're still wrestling with the ramifications of the Civil War, the American Revolution, the Second World War. So that's another thing to keep in mind. It's difficult, but of course, with big themes like race and immigration, the environment, the political landscape, you can ask students about their own perceptions of those things, which begin to stitch those things backwards in time. All right. So, we can, as educators in California history, we can teach exotic things. We can really stir the curricular pot and pull out exotic issues from the past. And by the excitement generated by that exoticism, we can energize our teaching and perhaps our students' response to it. There's nothing wrong with that. But we can also, and I think we have an obligation, to visit very tried and true historical topics with the energy of new ideas and new innovation. In other words, many an historical topic rendered a kind of dinosaur in our curriculum is in there because it's important. But we have an obligation to kind of stir it, as it were, and accompany it by new ideas and new theories and new research. That's a way to get us back now to the end of the 19th century or thereabouts, this complex of thematics in California history, and introduce a very traditional topic into discussion. If we were to invite a railroad, locomotive, and perhaps linked cars to, let's not bring it in the room yet, let's just have it out there on Mission Street. If all of us were quietly sitting here for a second, and I'm just going to ask you to be quiet for 1 second, and you heard in 2014, you heard a railroad whistle. Okay, so everyone be quiet now, just in your mind's ear, just hear that for a second. And I'm going to put it not on Mission, I'm going to put it a ways away. Put it over on 4th and Townsend or somewhere in Southern Pacific country. Put it a half mile away. Listen for it. Okay. What emotions or response do you have to that railroad whistle? Now you're not supposed to be quiet. You're supposed to tell me something.
Longing.
Longing. Fascinating word. What are you longing for, Ralph?
Journey.
Okay. Longing. Let's put that over here. What else?
Excitement, what's coming in.
Okay. Excitement. What else?
Nostalgia.
Nostalgia. Fascinating word. Here's your opportunity. Now, many of our students, actually, my students in Los Angeles, my collegiate students, many of them have not ridden on a light rail, or many of them not ridden on a passenger railroad. Okay? There's an exoticism to it that you can play with. But let's talk for a second about nostalgia. Nostalgia for what, Tom?
Actually, nostalgia for a movie, and most of the time we never listen to not really experience it, trying with movie images of the West.
Fascinating. Okay, nostalgic for imagery scrolling before your mind's eye about the West that's acoustically provoked. Okay. All right. You get the gist here. You've answered just as I hoped you would. Go back to the 19th century. Is a railroad nostalgic? No. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's the cutting edge of modernity, technological prowess, financial shenanigans, but also financial sophistication. It is anything but a nostalgic intrusion on the landscape. Ergo, our understanding of it with our students has to try to make sense of that transition from cutting edge of modernity to nostalgic longing for journey, but I bet if I pushed Ralph a little bit, Ralph's too sophisticated a student of history to say this exactly, but the longing could be for another era. And you can take your pick on that, simpler times, a time when America was efficient, a time when you could move across the country and, the excitement of adventure on the rails, etc. Very important to raise these issues to get students empathetic with the notion of a kind of nostalgia for something, and where's the divide that brings us back to a very different period about the appreciation of the railroads. And if we talk about the Transcontinental Railroad in particular, which is so intimately associated with exactly certainly this institution and its holdings, but this neighborhood, this district, this region, across the bay, onto Sacramento. Profoundly California feature of the landscape. So if you teach 19th century railroads, and not necessarily at all in the old style textbook recitation of the railroad age or triumphalism, not at all necessarily like that. But if you take the railroads as a feature of the post-Civil War economy, technology, landscape, etc., you have offered your students and yourselves an opportunity to peel back California and literally tie it to American historical trajectories, histories, and moments.